What's going on, my Pachos Chachos? Welcome to another Pacho Perspective. I am your host, Pasho. Today, we're going to talk about an old legend, history, if you will, about the Byzantine Emperor Andronikos and how he attempted to emasculate, essentially, the island of Chios. All right, so the island of Chios was suspected of disloyalty or resistance against the imperial authority. They had warriors, men who gave the emperor a bit of a problem. And so when he finally came into power over the island of Chios, Andronikos decided that he was going to order a mass castration of the island. He removed all the men, allowed the young boys to stay, and then prohibited the boys from participating in anything that we would otherwise consider to be a masculine thing. They were not allowed to wrestle. They were not allowed to fight. They were not trained with weapons. They had to essentially learn from the women and learn only women jobs. And what happened is that the men of Chios became so weak, so effeminate, that they would never rise up again. And Andronikos knew that if he could break the spirit of their men and turn the men into women, he would never have to deal with rebellion or with disloyalty again. And so the reason I bring this story up is because that's what's happening in our society today. I have two boys and I love them very much, and I want them to grow into chivalrous knights if I had a choice. I would want them to be men who would be willing to lay down their life and sacrifice themselves for their wife and their family. I want them to be the kind of men who open doors even for strangers, who, if it were raining and there was a puddle, they would take their jacket off and put it on the floor so that their girlfriend can walk over it and not get her nice shoes wet or dirty. I want them to be selfless. I want them to be leaders. I want them to be strong. I want them to be confident. I want them to be able to contribute to the good in this world, to prevent evil from spreading. Because remember, all evil needs to exist in this world is for good men to do nothing. And I think Andronikos knew that. If I got rid of all the good men, then the cruelty and the evil that he exacted on his constituency would be permissible. Who could stop him? I believe it's the same reason why governments always attempt to disarm their civilians. It has nothing to do with safety or protection of the people. If that were the case, they wouldn't be so cruel to their own people. They disarm them to turn them into useless, weak men who can't fight back against others who do have guns. Because isn't it ironic that no one can have guns except the government, except those who are in power. And those who are in power who vote to ban our guns are always so comfortably protected by the people who have guns. And so they weaken us in that way. I believe what Andronikos did is kind of the same thing that China is doing right now with our young men. Instead of what they do with their young boys, teaching them about martial arts, weaponry, engineering, sciences, right? All on that website that they have that is equivalent to TikTok, but is not TikTok. And yet China pushes on us. And unfortunately, thanks to President Trump, who thinks we need more military-aged single men in our country, he's allowed TikTok to stay, even though Congress has said we should get rid of it. And what does TikTok do? Why is TikTok bad? Well, boys are hypnotized by it. They look at a bunch of girls shaking their asses. They look at a bunch of girls doing yoga poses with their mounds and their curves and their lumps sticking out. They look at videos of girls doing squats in front of a camera so that the shape can be shown, so that the holes can be just slightly seen through their transparent leggings or painted on, like some of these 304s. And so TikTok makes us stupid. It makes us sexually overcharged. It is an issue with the Overton window that instead of growing and maturing and self-reflection and education, instead they are just numbed by the bread and circus of TikTok. And then we legalize marijuana. We legalize drugs. And what does that do? Does that make our men, our boys more manly? No, it turns them into a bunch of codependent junkies who are useless, who are young and numb, who instead of coming up with solutions will sit on the couch playing video games, masturbating to only fan models. And so China is our modern day Andronikos. We have also raised our boys in a society where women hate them. And so imagine the mind fuck that has to do to a boy when he hears nothing but girls saying they don't want and they don't need men. When they have to go down the halls of high schools and watch girls holding other girls' hands because now women have been convinced, thanks to the feminist movement, that their best option in life are to be lesbians. And so what motivation does a boy have then to approach a woman? And yet these women will complain, no, they're all simps, they're all incels, they don't talk to girls, they don't get up and give us their seats on the subway, they don't open the doors for us, they don't pay for our meals anymore. Well, who do you think did that? Because we did. We gladly did. My mother taught me, if you like a girl, you pay. She didn't say battle of the sexes. She didn't say you own her now because you paid for her meal. She said, if you liked a girl, you paid, as a demonstration of your love for that person. But now you've degraded us so much to believing that we are chauvinists, we are misogynists, we are rapists, future criminals, that we're all of a sudden supremacists of some sort. And what kind of confidence do you think a boy has when he hears those things, when he sees those things, when he is told that he is the problem? We are, the United States, a predominantly white culture. And so, of course, like Andronikos, you attack that culture and you make them feel suicidal. You give them drugs to continue feeling suicidal. That's why more than 50% of women in the United States are on SRIs and antidepressants. Is that because feminism is so great? Is that because them being lesbians make their lives so happy that they have to be on antidepressants? Is that why over 75% of lesbian marriages end in divorce? 3 times more than homosexual men when they get married? 50% more than heterosexuals when they get married? Does that also help women with this feminist movement when they're together in lesbian relationships, and lesbian relationships have more domestic violence abuse than any other demographic in relationships? But we have convinced them that they're all lesbians and that they don't need men. And that means sexually too, right? Or if they do, like these sick lesbians out there who will sleep with a man just for his semen. They'll go on a date. They'll pick the man out themselves. They'll rock, paper, scissors as to which one will get knocked up. Or, because they're both disgusting morally anyway, they'll both do it at the same time. If we're lucky, we'll have 2 kids, they say. And then the child is born without a father, even though a father was necessary. And then a child is going to be raised believing he has 2 mothers. Yeah? Did the top come out of one and the bottom came out the other, and like Legos, they snapped them together? No, one is the mother. The other one is the other one, not a mother. Just another person there for the ride to usurp a man's child. A man who probably doesn't even know that these 2 conspired to get pregnant on purpose. And they won't tell him. That's their kid, remember? They're more important. And when you have things like that, you have people like that, you have a society that pushes all of that, then you have a bunch of boys who don't get to turn into men. And you get a bunch of single mothers, which we weren't made to be single mothers. If that were the case, women would be like insects. They would be able to reproduce on their own. But there's a reason they have to reproduce with a man, because it also takes a woman and a man to raise a child. So if it's a young boy, he can become a man. He can become initiated into manhood. A woman cannot initiate a young boy into manhood because a woman is not a man, doesn't know what it means to be a man. And because of that, we don't have men. We have boys in adult bodies. We have boys who are emotionally retarded and don't know how to treat each other. That's why blacks kill more blacks than anyone else, black men at a much larger degree than whites killing whites, because that's the largest white killer. Only Asians, I think, are killed by blacks more than their own kind. It's like the only demographic. Everybody else, obviously, if you're an Indian man's going to kill you, statistically speaking. But you have these women now who are raising these boys, and because they're not men, they're not taught to be selfless. They're not taught to be self-sacrificing. They're not taught to be strong. If anything, they're taught to be dainty, to be effeminate. And what do you think is going to happen when we have a society of nothing but men who are not strong, who are hooked on drugs? Is that going to fill our military? Is that going to keep us safe? See, these are the 3D, 4D chess moves that China is playing. Like Andronikos, effeminate the populace. Then there will be no one to stand against you. When it's a fight between your guy and our guy like Tim Walz or Jussie Smollett or any of the other loafer-wearing fairies out there, we're dead. We're cooked. And even boys are being taught that they can be pincushions to the elite, to Hollywood. Even in Muslim cultures, little boys, there's a weird, freakish dance. I don't remember the name of it because it's stupid, but boys will dance sexually in front of men because that's what they're trying to condition, a bunch of slaves. Andronikos wanted slaves. He wanted men who were not men, who would submit to his rule. And right now we are being emasculated on purpose to weaken our country, to weaken our society, to poison our society. Because now they're even talking, like Canada, bringing something equivalent to the MAID program, the assisted suicide. And so think about it. You're white, you're male. Who's going to want to commit more suicide than them? Because they're hated by everybody. They've been bred to even hate themselves. It is the only country that teaches its young to hate its nation. Every other country tells them to have pride, to be proud of Deutschland, of Italia, of wherever, except ours. And so they hate themselves. And they'll be the first in line to have the government kill them for them. That's why suicides have been on the rise for the young boys. That's why depression is on the rise. That's why, Big Pharma is making all the money in the world selling all of their antidepressants. And so the solution, because I'm not just here to vent about problems, but I believe the solution here is that we need stories that remind young boys of what they can become. Stories of weak frailty that turns into strength, that learns to be selfless and then fights on behalf of his people. We need stories of men opening doors for women, of whispering kind words, being romantic, respecting the elderly, sober, if we want our society to have men like that someday. Because right now, I can't recall any story other than perhaps the story of David, where we are teaching our kids that they can become something greater, that a shepherd can become a king. But other than that story, and thank you, Angel Studios, for that, we have nothing. Every story teaches a young girl that she can dominate the world. Like in that ridiculous story, Ballerina, that this 100-pound soaking wet girl can take out 40 armed, trained military men who have twice, if not 3 times, the mass and muscle as she does. But in the movie, right, all you got to do is graze a guy in the balls, and then you can win. Even though when the number 1 tennis star in the women's league plays the last position in the men's league and gets crushed, they're still going to believe that they can do whatever men can do. They can bench press 300. If an assailant from a warring country came here, they would be able to take him down with a few martial arts moves that they saw in movies, I'm sure. Our children are being sold bad stories on purpose because stories are what we tell children to become the adults that we want. See, that's why in the Odyssey, that's why in all the classic literature, all the heroes were strong, they were wise, they had flaws, but they were undoubtedly men. And so it taught the young boys how to become men. And not just men. We don't want brutish barbarians. Odysseus was smart. He was a great leader. He was selfless, often putting his men before himself. See, that's what the Greeks knew. They knew if we tell our boys this, we will get men like Odysseus. Where now, all our stories glorify villainy. We have 2 movies, The Joker and The Joker Folie à Deux, that rationalize and give validation to the fact that the Joker was a psycho. It wasn't just, oh, he was a murderer. Well, he was a murderer because all these bad things happened. Like, just stupid. We're telling stories that doesn't matter what kind of training you go through. A little girl can beat you up with martial arts, while dancing ballet. And so these women had this overinflated sense of heroism. Did the girl or the woman who was shot in Minnesota because she tried to run over an ICE agent think that she was the heroine? That she could just plow through and be the hero? What if she murdered him? What if he didn't get to shoot and she ran him over? You already know all of society, especially the left, is going to be embracing that death, like they embraced the death of Charlie Kirk, like they will embrace my death and the death of Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and everyone else who speaks their minds freely and who asks questions, who challenges the system. And then they'll just erase that story, pretend it never happened, and keep our boys numb and submissive, like slaves. It's an interesting story. I wonder often if that is what's happening here. Is there some cabal, some Medici, or some secret organization that in order to make the world truly equal, and as we all know, socialism makes everyone equally poor, that they have allowed this to occur in our country? Because then who will fight for our country? When we have boys who hate their country, hate themselves, are alone, depressed, suicidal. It's a setup for an easy win for any of our enemies who want to come. Thank goodness Trump was still the kind of man that I hope our society embraces once again, who stands up for what is right, who stands up for God. So anyway, it's long enough. I hope you have a great day. I don't mean a Debbie Downer, but let's start thinking about stories that we can write to encourage and inspire our young boys to be the men that we want again. All right, women, chivalry is not dead. Let me correct you right there. It is not dead. The problem is it's not taught. If we started teaching chivalry again, we would have boys turn into men. We would have doors being held open. You, my beautiful women out there, would have every seat on a subway, on a bus, on a train. You would never have to stand because men would offer you their seats. But don't be surprised that they don't anymore. Remember, you told us you don't need us. You told us you don't want us. What are we supposed to do with that? You don't hold our hands. You don't dream of us when you're making love. Let's bring back chivalry, folks. And you'll see when we turn our boys into knights, not just barbarians with swords, but knights who practice the virtues of chivalry, of chastity. We'll have a society that we can be proud of again. Although I'm skeptical because, again, my Lord says that things will undoubtedly just keep getting worse and worse until the end of days. But I like to think that there is an ebb and flow of life, that although the tide may be nearing the shore of the end, there's still some ebb and flow left, that we can make some changes. And maybe by making these changes, we repair the relationship between men and women. We throw out those stupid notions of misogyny. We men have worshipped you ladies for lifetimes. We have placed you on pedestals. We have written poetry. We have created plays and stories and movies about how much we adore you, not because we are misogynists. We are your biggest fans. God bless. Pachos, Chachos for life. Until next time.